Good morning, true crime listeners, or whatever time it is when you're listening to this. I'm going to be trying something a little different than what I usually do. I'm going to be trying to release weekly-ish, just podcast episode, where we talk about things that are happening in the news the past week. Mostly true crime related. I really like the legal side of things, so it seems like we'll probably be covering hearings, any big arresting cases, or other news that's happening that is big, obviously. We'll see how it goes. Please feel free to send me ideas of what you'd like me to cover throughout the week. You can find me, I'll post in the description box, but you can find my link to all my social media handles. Please ensure to follow the podcast so you can get notified when episodes are released, because I still will be doing the audio versions of my YouTube videos when those are complete. Those just take a little bit while longer, lots of details to figure out. I enjoy doing these types of updates a lot more, discussing stories quickly rather than deep dives. I feel like it helps my ADHD. But deep dives really bring out the victim and give the whole timeline of the case rather than just bits and pieces, so I'm definitely not going to stop doing those. Remember that everyone discussed is innocent until proven guilty. Please feel free to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Also, just to point out for everybody that may not be aware of this, these are ongoing cases. You're listening to today could be different than what actually is happening tomorrow because things happen so fast. So please just remember that when you're listening to this, that it's recorded on August 11th, 2024, and we can just jump right into it. I just wanted to touch base on Sarah Boone's case. She's been in court twice this week. If you're following her case, then you know that she is now representing herself, or it's called pro se in the courts. So these motions that she filed, she did on her own. Quickly, I'll just recap the case for those who aren't aware who Sarah Boone is. She was arrested for second-degree murder of her boyfriend, Jorge Torres Jr., who was found zipped in a suitcase, deceased in Winter Park, Florida on February 24th, 2020. According to Sarah, the two were playing hide and seek, just having a good night. When Jorge got into the suitcase, she went upstairs and ended up falling asleep, leaving him in the suitcase overnight, unable to get out. The biggest problem, in my opinion, that Sarah seems to have, at least of the evidence that we know about, is that video. It's so damning where you can see or hear Jorge in the suitcase yelling that he can't breathe and for Sarah to let him out. And unfortunately, she can be heard back saying some pretty rude things, and she sounds intoxicated, slurring her words, saying things like, "Fuck you, this is for what you made me feel like when you cheated on me," and all this other stuff. So that doesn't seem like that was accidental. So she has been in jail since her arrest in February 2020, and she's still waiting to go to trial. One of the biggest issues, besides COVID-19, of course, has been that Sarah cannot keep an attorney. She was on her 8th attorney before she was required to start representing herself, as the court ruled that due to her conduct, she had lost her right to court-appointed lawyers, like I said, due to her actions. Of course, if you have been following this trial, you know that Sarah was not going to like this one bit. She was in court on Monday, August 5th, and of course during this court proceeding, she mentioned multiple times that she does not want to be pro se anymore. I'm not sure she's really getting that the judge doesn't care that she doesn't want to, based on her actions and her conduct. She filed motions requesting money for certain witnesses and funding to pay these witnesses or people, which the court denied because, according to them, they want more specific information, like how much money to what exact people. She was putting more broad people that she still needed to find and things she still needed to line up. And we all know the government wants to know exactly where their money's going when it comes to things like this. Sarah was also requesting to be appointed standby counsel. However, the court denied this, as they stated that standby counsel is for pro se dependents in the chance that during the trial or something, they decide, nope, not representing myself. This standby lawyer will come in and finish out the trial. It's more for people that want to be pro se, not for people that are forced. And I guess the right for counsel taken away, which doesn't happen very much. I've never heard it, but I'm not surprised that it is in this case. It appears she may have misunderstood anyways what standby counsel was for and viewed it more of a co-counsel rather than someone who would step in if she couldn't do it anymore. Again, this was denied. Either way, she's on her own. She was granted funds for her private investigator who was assigned to her through Prison Break investigations. We've seen him a few times during the hearings, so that's a win for Sarah. She was also again in court this past Friday, August 9th, where she filed a motion where she wanted to be unshackled during her trial and her hands freed or uncuffed during hearings. This was granted for her. She explained that it was just too hard to write with her handcuffs on, and then, of course, during trial, the court pushes so that the jury doesn't know that the defendant is in jail for this crime, which is weird because we all know how it goes, but it's something that's in almost all the courtrooms across the U.S. So she will be unshackled. I believe she has to wear some sort of bracelet monitoring, though, something along that line, maybe like a shackles, like what's his face at Darryl Brooks. But we'll see. She's scheduled for another hearing on August 14th. The judge seems to really be pushing out these hearings and motions. I'm sure it's because he wants to be on track to go to trial in October. I personally think that this may get pushed back a little bit. Not a lot, not a year, maybe like 2 months, so that Sarah will have additional time, because we know that she's fighting the date of her trial. It was like 62 days, and she just got her discovery. Although it's her case. Who knows most of it better than she does, correct? I'll keep you updated. So now we're going to go from a Florida woman to a Detroit doctor. There's been some updates in the case of Dr. Devon Hoover out of Detroit, Michigan. For those of you who are not familiar with this case, 53-year-old Devon Hoover, a prominent Detroit neurosurgeon, was found wrapped in a blood-soaked carpet with just his socks on in the third-story crawl space of his home on April 23, 2023. His white Range Rover was spotted parked in front of a driveway of another home, so police were notified because people want to get in and out of their driveway, I'm sure. Police would come and investigate. They would find that there would be blood inside this Range Rover. So, of course, that brought some interest to them. They decided to tow it back to their headquarters. So police would then go to the registered owner's home, which was Devon's. But when police knocked on the front and back door, no one answered. Police would end up returning the following day, but this time it would be for a welfare check requested by Devon's family. They grew concerned after he failed to visit his dying mother, who lived out of state. Police would find blood outside the home. I can't remember exactly where off the top of my head. I should have put it in my notes. So this prompted them to make the decision to force entry, where they found the doctor. It appeared he had been shot when he was found, and an autopsy would confirm that he was shot twice in the back of the head. Police would find no forced entry, which would lead them to believe that he knew his killer. Inside the home, police found that his phone, his wallet, and 2 designer watches, one being worth $6,000 and one being worth $7,500, were missing. Also discovered on the doctor's account was multiple fraudulent financial transactions that, from the press conference, I guess, totaled over $30,000, which is insane. But we'll get to the update that came out this past week. It was announced that 34-year-old Desmond Burks was arrested and charged with first-degree premeditated murder, felony murder, larceny over $20,000, being a felon in possession of a firearm, and 3 counts of felony firearm for the 2023 murder of Devon Hoover. Police would tell the community during the press conference that they viewed hundreds of video, including surveillance video. They pulled the doctor's cell phone records to provide police with evidence that included over 4,000 messages sent between Desmond and the doctor. And police also were able to use Devon's cell phone footprint that showed him traveling from his home to Desmond's home, back to his home. Then it would show that the phone returned to the area of Desmond's home, then would go to a local mall, and after that would never return back to Dr. Hoover's home again. It was also revealed that Devon and Desmond were in an intimate relationship, and that, quote, on occasion, Desmond would charge Devon for these sexual services, end quote. However, it does not appear that a specific motive has been mentioned. But if you look at the charges and what seems like was stolen, it seems like money, unfortunately, was the root of this. Money brings out the ugliness in some people. It's gross. So Desmond was arraigned on Thursday, August 8th, where he was ordered to return to jail without bond. Yes, I said returned to jail, as if he was there on prior charges, because he was. He was charged in another case unrelated to that of the murder of Dr. Hoover. Desmond was involved in an alleged road rage incident where it appears that a 67-year-old man bumped into Desmond's car, and after that argument ensued outside the vehicles, it's alleged that Desmond punched this elderly man in the face and left him lying unconscious in the street. Sadly, this gentleman would end up losing his life due to the injuries that he occurred from Desmond. So Desmond is expected to be back in court for this case on August 15th. If convicted, he faces up to life in prison, as Michigan does not have the death penalty. But I'll keep you updated. All right, now we're going to be moving to Nevada. More precisely, we will be going to Las Vegas, where Robert Tellis is gearing for trial. That's basically the update. Although his defense attorney will be receiving information the day the trial is set to start, Robert is pushing for his trial to start this upcoming week. The former county public administrator is charged with open murder for the death of journalist Jeff Gearman, who worked for the Review-Journal when he began reporting on the hostile work environment in Robert Tellis's office. So basically, it looks like some people in the office of Robert Tellis went to Jeff with the information of a hostile work environment, and they also provided this video. I believe it was recorded by the two co-workers of Robert and a woman who was working in his office with these two co-workers, getting out of the back seat out of a vehicle. And if I remember correctly, they're like fixing their clothes, which of course, I'm sorry, that can't even be misconstrued in my opinion. However, he would release a statement saying that he was in love with his wife and that at this time when the video was recorded, he was just trying to get off his chest. He was having a hard time at work, all this other bullshit in the backseat of the car. I'm just going to let that one sit there for a minute. But not surprisingly, during his re-election in June of 2022, Robert lost the position for public administrator. And this would reportedly due, in part at least, to the articles that Jeff wrote exposing the negativity around the office and his alleged affair. So now we're going to jump forward a few months to August 3rd, 2022, when a neighbor would find Jeff's lifeless body laying outside his home behind some bushes on the left side of his house. It is believed that he was killed about 24 hours before he was found for two reasons. One, the neighbor reported seeing him having an argument with someone in the, not early, but like the morning hours of September 2nd. And of course, the decomposition of a body would give some sort of insight how long he was there after he passed away. And of course, decomposition of a body would give some sort of insight on how long he was there after he passed away. And an autopsy would show that he died from 7 stab wounds to the neck and chest. And after 5 days, it would be Robert Tellis that was arrested for his murder. 5 days, that's all it took. Some of the evidence against him would include a car that was seen on surveillance leaving the area of Jeff's home. It was reported to be a maroon or red Yukon Denali, and wouldn't you know it, Jeff has a maroon Denali, one that is actually registered to his wife. So winner there. When Robert was questioned, police took his DNA and collected his clothing. Robert's DNA would match DNA found under Jeff Gearman's nails. So in court, Tellis would plead not guilty, and of course, with the personality that he has, he did an interview following his arrest. In his interview with one of the local news stations, he claimed that he was innocent and the evidence against him had been planted. The evidence, including clothing, a hat, and even a shoe found in Tellis's home and garage, were seen on the person that they believed to have killed Jeff on video surveillance walking away. So like I said, the update is that Tellis is ready to go to trial, and he's insisting to do so. Jury selection is to begin at 1 p.m. this coming Monday, August 12th, and the trial is expected to last roughly 10 days. It is estimated that the prosecution would call about 20 witnesses, while the defense plans to call 12, including Robert himself, who, according to his lawyer, plans to testify in his own defense. However, we all know a lot can change between now and when it gets to his turn to present his defense. But I could definitely see this guy trying to talk his way out of this. All he needs to do, in his mind, I would assume, again, this is my own opinion, is just explain his side. It's a misunderstanding. People are just not understanding that the evidence is planted. He didn't do this. I don't believe that. DNA, can be planted, but I don't believe that it happened in this case. I will keep you updated as to how this trial plays out. Like I mentioned, the defense is still waiting on electronics of Jeff Gearman's from the paper who he wrote articles for, the Review-Journal, because it looks like they had to review it for some sort of confidential information. It is a bit odd that the defense is getting anything the day the trial is supposed to start. I don't know. I would assume that most defense attorneys would push it off, but I guess if he's pushing to go to trial, what can you really do other than it comes back on appeal? Maybe, I'm not really sure. So to trial we go. Next is a case that has been in the news 25 years, which, as much as I hate hearing them go unsolved for that long, I do love hearing that they get an arrest, because finally someone is answering to the nasty things they've done, and an arrest means that person's still alive. The case I'm discussing is that of 21-year-old Melissa Wolfenbarger, who went missing back in late 1998. However, she would not be reported missing until January of 2000. Melissa was living with her husband, Christopher, and her 2 children back when her mother spoke with her on Thanksgiving Day, 1998. Melissa would tell her mom that she returned back to Christopher, and according to Melissa's mother, she would often return to Christopher just to be with her kids. And this would be the last time that her mother spoke with her. We often hear a lot in domestic violences that the person returns to relationships because they don't want to miss out on their children, or simply because they don't want to leave their children with this terrible person. So when Christmas would come and go and the family would get no more word from Melissa, this made them feel really uneasy because it was not like her to not reach out to her family, especially during the holiday time. From what I could gather, I believe they didn't have a phone, so she would have to use someone else's. It wasn't like her mom could just give her a call. This was 1998. Things were a little different in the world than they are now. But after some time of not hearing from her, Melissa's parents would decide that they would travel to her home in Atlanta, Georgia. I may have forgot that in the beginning. This case is out of Atlanta, Georgia. So when Melissa's family arrived at her duplex she was living at with Christopher, they realized the entire place was empty. A neighbor would tell them that everything had been cleaned out during the week between Christmas and New Year's. Now, this made the family feel even more like something was wrong. Melissa would tell her family when she was moving. It didn't make them worry any less when Melissa didn't reach out for her mother's birthday in February. And it would be finally in January of 2000 when Melissa would be reported missing by her mother. Police would go speak with her husband, who said that the last time he saw her was like back in April or May of 1999. No big deal. Saw her walking down the street, hasn't seen her since, didn't report her missing, apparently wasn't worried, and he didn't notify the members of her family that he had not seen her because, according to him, he thought she would come home when she could, which is weird, when she could. According to her husband, Christopher Wolfenbarger, Melissa would take multiple shifts at the Waffle House to make extra money for the family. She would sometimes stay at a hotel instead of coming home. And Christopher would also mention around the time that she was last seen, she was creating fake IDs and social security numbers for the family to have a fresh start in California. For them, that was the dream, California. And he thought she had gone on and went to discover the dream on her own, leaving him and the kids behind. But Melissa's family never thought this was the case. They knew in their hearts that she would never leave her children. According to a recent press conference, there was never any doubt that someone was responsible for her going missing, and to them, they knew from the moment she disappeared, it was her husband. Now, let's jump back to 2003. Melissa's father, Carl Patton Jr., I think it was arrested and convicted of 3 murders and was dubbed the Flint River Killer. It was this media attention to her father that would go on to help advance Melissa's case. At the time, I believe she was missing like 4 or so years, and her family was desperately seeking answers. Unfortunately, they would learn that Melissa was deceased. DNA was matched to dismembered remains found in black trash bags along the road in April and June of 1999. These bags were found in 2 different time periods, but in the same general area, like a mile away from her home. Again, this DNA didn't come until 2003, and one of the possible reasons this was not looked into in 1999 as Melissa, as it appears the remains were misidentified as a male from Twiggs County. Now, only a few body parts were actually recovered, which I would assume would make it difficult to tell a lot of information. And a lot has happened since 1999. And now with advancement in science, with all that stuff, but still, that's poopy. One of those body parts was reportedly a human head, and according to an autopsy that was conducted, her neck was severed with a saw, which I'm only mentioning for the fact of something I'm going to be discussing in a moment. According to investigators, Melissa's husband, Christopher, was listed as a person of interest in discussing the case during an episode of Dateline released in 2021. Here we learn that Melissa and Christopher were in school when they met and fell in love. They would marry young and move to Atlanta, where the family of 4 lived. But we learned it wasn't a very picture-perfect relationship. Police would say that Christopher had an extensive criminal history of family violence and that witnesses stated during the investigation that there had been abuse to Melissa. While Christopher would say just because he has a criminal history, it does not make him a killer, which I'll have to agree, but there's other things that would bring Christopher to view in a bad light, like how he was fired from his job at a glass factory over a suspected theft over a reciprocal saw, a glass factory that was reportedly in the same area where Melissa's remains were found. So we have a saw that he was fired for probably taking, the fact that unfortunately her remains were, it looked like, cut up with a saw. They were disposed of about a mile away from her house by a glass factory that Christopher worked at. That seems a little coincidental. Police would announce that Christopher was arrested on Tuesday, August 6th, where he is currently being held in Fulton County Jail. As this case moves forward through the justice system, I'll make sure to keep you updated. I'm sure since this was an arrest, it'll be quite a while before trial happens. But again, I'll let you know. That's all I have for an episode. I may be missing next week's as I finally get my son back after 6 weeks of him being out of state with his dad. He comes home on Saturday and I cannot wait. It's been so long that it's been the longest I've been away from him. It's just, so I may not worry about the podcast at all. Maybe I'll put it out on Friday so I can just enjoy the entire weekend with my Avery. I cannot wait. So we'll see, but I will keep you guys updated on the cases I covered. Thanks for listening. If you made it this long, I truly appreciate you and any kind of review that you could leave me. It would mean the world, as growing the podcast and my YouTube channel are a big goal of mine. I'm really going to try pushing out content, so please bear with me as I find myself in this process. Until the next episode, stay safe out there. Bye.
She didn't deserve what she got. And I hope anybody who's in a domestic violence situation, please get out. Don't take it. Because it could easily be you. It could be your sister. It could be your mother. Make sure they get away.